Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Daniel Aleman about I Might Be in Trouble. Daniel is an award-winning author of Indivisible and Brighter Than the Sun. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I loved the premise of this book. It's something different. So will you give the audience an overview about what I Might Be in Trouble is about?
Of course. Well, it follows the story of David Alvarez, a 28-year-old writer in New York City who finds himself in a bit of a pickle when he wakes up one morning to find his date from last night dead in his bed. And that leads him to make a couple of bad decisions because he decides to call his literary agent to help him move the body out of his apartment so that no one will link him to this dead guy. And that, means that trouble ensues.
It does, and hilarity as well. So it's definitely, a mystery, but it's also a humorous mystery. And you've done so much fun with coloring in all the things. So I do want to ask you, there's always that you should write what you know. So how many dead people have you woke up next to?
None, thankfully. But, when thinking about write what you know, I do think there's a lot of personal experience in this book. Being an author, publishing my third book, as is the main character in the novel. I also was 28 years old when I was drafting this, the first version of this novel. And there's a lot in it also about growing up and encountering unexpected challenges as you navigate, professional disappointment, personal, romantic disappointment. And the main character is going through all of that. And some of these things, it's interesting because I was going through it at the same time that I was writing about it. So it was cathartic in a way to explore it as I was living it in real time.
Well, and that was sort of because I had told Daniel before we started recording that I was going to torture him a little bit. And the reason is because just like you, your initials are DA. The main character in the book's initials are DA. I know you were around the same age, and I knew this was your third book as it is David's. So it's really, really cute because it reminded me a lot of Anthony Horowitz, Hawthorne and Horowitz series, and the fact that Anthony Horowitz is a character in his books. And here is something you've done, sort of like art mirrors real life and vice versa. So
totally. And it's funny because some of the things that David goes through in the book are things that I've gone through after, I even finished editing. An example that I was discussing with someone a few weeks ago was that David goes on a TV show, a morning show, to discuss his third book. And it ended up happening for me. I got to be on TV discussing my third book. And it's funny in a way how certain things I manifest through my writing.
That's a good thing too. And I think, in a lot of life, lots of us manifest things. And I like that. So if you had to give David an astrological sign, what do you think it would be? Do you have any idea?
I think, I did ask myself at some point, when would his birthday be? I would give him my own birthday, which is November 17. I'm a Scorpio. And I don't know if David is a Scorpio now that I think of it, but I do like to think that he has that little ambition to him that some Scorpios have. So maybe that's his sign.
Well, he definitely has a lot of romantic in him as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even after waking up next to a dead fellow, there's a couple of other times in the book where someone looks at him and he's very excited. That whole, oh my gosh, maybe this is the one type of conversation. And
totally.
I think I also, in reading this, I also thought about, so I am not, me personally, I'm not fond of internet or online dating because I find that the average human is a real good salesperson for bullshit. Yeah. And so it's this is a picture from 20 years ago. I'm not interested. I don't like surprises. So what about you? How do you find navigating that? I think you have a partner, right?
Yes, I do have a partner, a long-term partner now. But, a few years ago, I was navigating the dating scene in a big city. And I found that for me, at least, like being online was the easiest, perhaps not the best, but definitely the easiest way to meet people. And part of this novel comes from a desire to laugh at myself, laugh at those experiences that I had. One of the things that I wanted David to show us is just how challenging it can be to find a romantic partner in this day and age. And even in those moments when you think to yourself, oh my God, I finally found the one, he could be the person I've been dreaming of meeting, so many things can go wrong. Like you can, lose a connection, that person can get back together with their ex, like you can get ghosted, whatever, or you can find the guy dead in bed next to you, which is, satire, but it just comes to show how challenging it is to find a partner.
Well, I agree. And I do think, I mean, I don't really want to admit I might have been sitting around dreaming about this, but I have thought to myself before, what would happen if you hook up with a stranger and then something really goes really, really wrong because you don't really know how you would react. And I mean, so David is thrown into a situation that is totally unique and not in his wheelhouse either. These just aren't things that we are equipped to deal with. But I love the tenacity of Stacy, his literary agent. So give the audience a little bit of who Stacy is.
So Stacy is his late 50s to early 60s literary agent. She's perhaps my favorite character in the book. She is very sassy and very determined to help David, even if that help takes him on questionable journeys. She's funny. She's loyal as a friend. I think she is the person that you want by your side if you find a dead body in your bed. And yeah, she's definitely a highlight of the novel. If you haven't read it yet, I think you're gonna love her.
I agree. I think Stacy, you could tell that you had such fun writing Stacy and David as well. But I mean, especially Stacy, there's something, she's that person that we often hear, the ride and die person. Stacy's in it for the long haul. And of course, to be really honest, Stacy's a businesswoman. So this is also a business decision she's making because she really realizes that this can impact her greatly one way or another. And so she's doing this not only because she's David's friend, but she's doing it because it's good for business, so to speak.
Totally. And she's the one that comes up with the crazy idea of moving the dead body. And she sees this as inspiration for David, for her clients. She thinks that this is going to be what helps him get out of that, rut that he's in. And, and perhaps she's right. Perhaps that is what David needed to find inspiration and to be able to express himself through his writing again.
Well, and you did a fun thing for this reader anyway, by giving him why don't I tell my story and make it fictionalized, which, that's a very tricky thing to do for anyone, no matter who it is, to take something that's really autobiographical for David, and then he turns it into fiction. So
I think that's what I always do with every single one of my books. And some of them are closer to reality than others, but I see myself in my main characters always. And every single book I write is an exploration of where I'm at in my life. Through my writing, I understand the world better. I understand myself better. And so when I sit down to decide what my next book is going to be, I really look inward at what's, keeping me up at night, at what, the answers that I need to find. And I seek to find them through my stories.
Oh, I love that. What are your first two books about?
They're young adult books. So they're mostly about immigration. They're about belonging, about finding your place in the world when you don't always feel like you belong. I might be in trouble with my transition to adult fiction, which has also been exciting and liberating. I think writing for an adult audience has allowed me to be more honest in many ways and depict my life and my reality a bit more, closely to the things that I actually am going through.
Well, and there's in this book also there's a bit of belonging as well, you know. So David isn't really sure where he or doesn't really sure where he fits into the world in a lot of ways. I think if you don't agree with me, you can always say I don't think so.
No, I absolutely agree.
I feel like he was doing a lot of soul searching, as not only from his literary work but also with his family. You know, I think all of us know that time you have to ask mom and dad for a little help when you've been self-sustaining, but you hit on a hard time and you have to help. I remember when I lived in Miami, I hit a really rough patch, and I called on my dad, and he wasn't really doing well financially, but he said to me, you can always come home. Well, of course, when you've made that decision to strike out, coming home is not a mental option you want to deal with. And so I saw that in David. You know, he goes and he appeals to his dad, and then of course his stepmother, I just wanted to strangle her, bless her, you know.
I mean, and I wanted to show complicated family relationships, especially through this lens of being queer, because so many of us as queer people have relationships with our families that are not necessarily bad. Like, we can have close relationships, but complicated. Sometimes we may feel like our family doesn't understand us or doesn't see us the way that we want to be seen. And that's definitely part of the tension that David faces with his dad, where perhaps his dad is not a bad person, but he's just a bit absent and a bit blind to the needs of his child. And yeah.
You know, so one thing that strikes me, and I know almost all parents are good parents one way or another. They want better for their children.
Totally.
But I think oftentimes, because a parent may not feel the same way their queer child feels, they don't really see what makes them happy. And, you know, a happy individual, no matter how old they are, no matter their sexuality or gender, happiness really does make a happy life. And some parents just simply don't understand. And I give them some grace, because, you know, none of us come with an instruction manual. We as children don't come with an instruction manual to our parents. They certainly don't come with one for us. But I really enjoyed your navigation of that, because you gave David sort of a home base, but yet at the same time an absent one that's a little far-reaching for him. So, and I think so many of us can identify with that.
Totally. And like you said, it's like the option of coming home, but like sometimes that's not the right choice for you. And that's what David is encountering as well.
Well, it is. And, you know, I think sometimes my venturing out early on was because I needed to spread my wings and find out who I was. But then I thought, if I returned to where I grew up, what was I destined for? Working in a factory? And I am not a rule follower. I'm artistic.
Totally. So many of us are. And and it's hard to make a living as an artist, as David also shows us. Like, it's one thing to have those big dreams, but then to make them into a reality, and also to sustain them, like to sustain any level of success as an artist is really hard. And that's also what's at the core of this character, just feeling like he reached his dream, but then having that fear of failure still, having that fear of having to go back to the beginning. And that also pushes him to do things that perhaps aren't wise to do, but that will hopefully help his career.
Yes. Yeah. So I will ask, so in this book, David's first novel is The Millers, and it's a really huge hit. And I know that, or at least I think, do your family and friends look at your books and say, oh, is this me? Is this me? Or did you model that after me? Or are they afraid to ask?
To a degree. I have had a couple of people ask me, and I've also openly said to a couple of people in my life, like, you inspired this character. And I only ever say that to people when I mean it as a compliment, of course. The character is, you know, good and honorable and there to help the main character. I think inevitably as a writer, there are little bits of the people around me that trickle into my work. And that's not always intentional. Like, sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh my God, like the relationship that the main character has to this other character mimics my relationship with so and so. And I firmly believe that as authors, we own our own experiences. And part of that is being able to, translate these relationships however we can and however we want. And as long as we're not putting anyone like on full blast, where like so and so betrayed me on this date, and that's why I wrote about them. Then I mean, I think it's fair. I think it's fair game to talk about people in your life.
I do too, because I mean, those things are the things that influence us. If you go out to breakfast and the server is really, really nice, you're more apt to put a nice server in your book. If you have a really, really horrific experience, you're more willing to write about that. You may not associate it with this one person, but that experience will influence something somewhere along the line, I think.
Absolutely. And I think too about especially songwriters, like artists who do that very openly. They write about their relationships, they write about their own lives. And so as a novelist, I think that that's something I'm also allowed to do.
Yes, I think so. And I think it's incumbent upon you as well, because what you're bringing to the table is an honest experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what readers really do want.
Totally. And as long as anyone out there can find a little piece of the book that resonates with them and that feels authentic and true to their own experience, then I have succeeded as an author, I think.
I agree. So now, where would you put your book as far as if you had to pick a category? Would you just call it a literary piece of fiction? I mean, it's got a lot of romance in it as well. Not just a dead romance, but a romance.
That is a very interesting question. Like, to me, when I started writing this, I thought of it as a comedy all along. I wanted to make people laugh. It's like satire. It's like just making fun of so many aspects of my own, problems, like of my creative problems, my romantic problems. Like I wanted to satirize what it means to be queer in this day and age. And inevitably, publishing likes to put a label on books because that makes them easier to sell. And I've been a bit surprised that the mystery thriller label has been slapped on this book so consistently. Because, while there are like elements of mystery and suspense, like that's not what I find to be the heart of the novel. But as you said, there's a little bit of everything. It truly is a genre-bending book. It has romance. It has literary strokes here and there. It has
comedy.
It has a little bit of everything, truly.
And I guess, I do sort of understand why the mystery thriller gets associated with it, because we, the audience, are trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Right.
Is there going to be comeuppance? Should there be comeuppance? Where would this land us up at the end of the day? So I understand that, but I agree with you. I think it is genre bending. I think it touches on a lot. I don't think I do think there's something for everyone. So if you want an all around book that's humorous with a bit of mystery and a little sex and a little, thriller, then this is the one.
Yeah, totally. Hopefully, as you said, you can, whatever type of book you enjoy, you're going to be able to find a little something here.
Absolutely. So have you found the best taco in Toronto yet?
Yes, I think so. Well, I found some favorites.
Okay.
So I definitely have the ones that I keep coming back to. One of them, if anyone listening is in Toronto, Los Compas is very, very good. That's a recent favorite.
Lovely. I like it. I do that with donuts when I travel.
No way.
Yeah, I try to find like some unique donut shop in a city when I'm traveling. I'll give myself an indulgence of a donut. So
that's so cool. I love that.
A lot of fun things to do. So
I love that. Do you have any favorites that you can think of?
Absolutely. My very favorite is Byler's in the Reading Market in Pennsylvania. My second favorite is Cane's in Saugus, right outside of Boston.
Okay, cool.
So totally recommend both of those. And there's one in Chicago that's named I cannot remember right this minute, but it's all over Chicago. So, but I didn't get this chunky by not eating a donut. So
You gotta indulge in your guilty pleasures every now and then.
Absolutely. Again, the book is I Might Be in Trouble. Daniel, do you have a website or social media you'd like to share with the audience?
I do. So my website is danielaleman.com, and on social media, I'm mostly on Instagram at Dan Aleman. And yeah, I look forward to connecting.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining me. I had such a great time. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.